Namaskarams. Hello everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and namaskarams to all Rasikas. Happy Father's Day to all of you. I am Sriram Natarajan Iyer, President and co-founder of Layasaram Institute of Indian Arts, a Twin Cities-based 501c3 non-profit organization. Since 2010, Layasaram has been supporting the arts in the Twin Cities and around the world with a simple motto of perform, educate, and collaborate. Today's event is free, although you may make tax-deductible contributions on our PayPal page at paypal.me/Layasaram. PitrudevoBhava means to consider your father as God, which is a philosophical way to say that always obey your father and respect your father because he, along with your mother, has given you this life that you are living. As you can see, Pitru has an ancestral legacy connotation, not necessarily restricting it to the modern idea of father. Pitru is inclusive of Mata. In a more esoteric context, there are different classes of Pitrus, mainly the Deva Pitru and the Manushya Pitru, meaning the divine Pitrus and our ancestors. Our Pitrus live forever by virtue of their righteous actions. Today, we explore the life and the legacy of one such righteous divine Pitru, Sangeeta Kalanidhi Shri TK Jayarama Iyer, as we speak with his son Dr. J. Krishnamurthy and his grandchildren Dr. KVS Vinay and Srimati Purnima Krishnamurthy. Today's event brings together a number of events around us, happenings: the International Yoga Day, summer solstice, a new moon or Amavasya, a solar eclipse in India, and Father's Day. To top it, yesterday marked the 49th year of TKJ Sir's passing. With the righteousness that TKJ Sir has lived his life, we pray to him as a divine Pitru to shower his family and all of us, his Rasikas, with his benevolent grace. Thank you, one and all, everybody, for helping us bring together today's event. Now, to our moderator for the event, Bhuvana Nandakumar. Bhuvana, as many of you might know, has very kindly and graciously been the MC for many of our events. Bhuvana Nandakumar's early introduction to Kuchipudi and Bharatanatyam taught her the importance of art in making, shaping, and even saving lives. During our last event, PitrudevoBhava, which we did for Mother's Day, we got to know a little bit about Bhuvana's mother, Dr. Prema. Bhuvana comes from a family with a storied legacy. Bhuvana's father, M.S. Nandakumar, is an engineer by education. As a descendant of the Tata Charyar family, he is a sthanikam at the Srirangam Ranganatha Swami temple and the keeper of his family tradition and history. Her paternal grandmother is the famous writer Ranganayaki Tilakam, Tatam, who was given the name of Kumudini by Kalki Krishnamurthy. She was the first translator of Rabindranath Tagore into Tamil. Bhuvana is fortunate to be able to trace her lineage back 7 generations. She says if we are able to see further, it is because we stand on the shoulders of giants. To the torch-bearer of this illustrious parampara, my namaskarams, as I welcome you to moderate today's show for our viewers.
Namaskaram. Namaskaram. Sriramji, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Happy Father's Day to you and to all the fathers out there and those who celebrate them. It is true, we are what we are today because of those who came before us, who set a model for us to aspire to higher levels of achievement. As I reflect on what Sriramji you just said and consider the word Pitru in its plurality, in terms of encompassing one's ancestors, the men and women who came before us, it brings to my mind the word parampara, the lineage of generations of teachers and students. Sometimes by a quirk of fate, they could also be parents and children and grandchildren. And the knowledge, whether spiritual, artistic, or educational, that is passed down through these successive generations. On behalf of Layasaram, I will be having a conversation with the descendants of distinguished violinist and musicologist, Sri TK Jayarama Iyer, recipient of both the Sangeet Natak Academy Award and the title of Sangeeta Kalanidhi from the Music Academy of Madras. We will reflect on his legacy, his parampara, as a father, of course, but also as a performance musician, a composer par excellence, and as a music scholar. At the end of the program, we will have time for your questions about Sri TK Jay sir. What would you like to know about him, his life, and his work, and his multifaceted talents? By the way, we are bringing this event live exclusively on YouTube, so you can ask your questions in the chat box on your screen as you're watching this show. Let us begin by listening to this short clip of TK Jay sir's music that illustrates all aspects of his versatility as a Carnatic musician, a composer of different genres. What you just heard is a short clip illustrating so many different aspects of Sri TKJ's genius and versatility. None of this would have been possible without the diligent and persistent efforts of his son, Dr. J. Krishnamurthy. Without his role as the primary archivist and his devoted work to honor his father, TKJ sir's body of work and record of achievements would be lost to us. I was fortunate enough to be able to ask Dr. Krishnamurthy a few questions and record his responses with the help of his children. Namaskaram, Dr. Krishnamurthy. I have been fortunate to have a glimpse of the records that you have saved, retrieved, and even in some cases restored of TKJ sir's life. What I have noticed is that there's a certain meticulousness about it. Can you tell us a little more about the process you went through in organizing all these artifacts? Photographs, notes, recordings, videos, there are so many of these. How did it all come together?
In 1974, my sister-in-law, Rekha, went to Singapore and she brought a Sony cassette recorder and gave it to me. That gave me an incentive to start recording music. Till then, we had only one program of Father, which was his last but one program, and that was in a spool recorder. So I converted that program into cassettes first. Then this gave me some impulse, and I started looking for more of his programs. Daily in the morning, between 7:50 and 8 a.m., All India Radio used to broadcast a Vadyavrinda piece. So I used to keep the recorder ready, and the moment a piece of father used to come, I used to record it. Yes. In the afternoon between 3:30 and 4 p.m. and on Sundays between 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. a lot of Carnatic music used to come. Similarly, on Sunday night, they used to broadcast from their archives, and they used to broadcast from 10 to 11 a program called Child. All these programs I used to listen very carefully and keep my recorder ready. And whenever a program father used to come, I used to record and store them in cassettes. Later on, after a few years, I transformed all these recordings into digital form. So that's I had a huge collection of father, both in terms of orchestration pieces and also in terms of his violin solos. Father used to give regular recording to All India Radio, and that is why his programs used to come also quite frequently. The second thing about books, father used to buy books from the market and build a library of his own. Whenever he bought a book, he used to write the name of the place purchased, the price of the book, and the date of the book purchased. The books, mostly they were books on music in, say, any language, English, Tamil, Sanskrit, and Hindi. Thus, he had a huge collection of books in his lifetime, and I am quite sure he had read almost all the books because there used to be markings on the books. And many of these books are very rare books, and some of them are more than 100 years old. So that is the way the library was built. They are still with our family, and it is with us. The third thing about photographs. Whenever father used to attend a program or whenever a VIP visited All India Radio Delhi, there used to be photographers who used to take photographs. And my father was given a copy of the photos. So my father used to write behind the photo the occasion, the person, the VIP who came, the date he came. So after his death, we collected these photos. It is a huge collection and a collection with a lot of VIPs, Marshal Tito, the Yugoslavian legendary president, and Earl Warren, Chief Justice, and Marian Anderson, and Galbraith, and so many and others. So these photos we made into an album, also digitized it, and along with all the captions possibly. That is what I have done, and that is how we have a good library of this in terms of music, in terms of books, and in terms of his photos.
It is very clear that you learned to be this detailed and careful with your record keeping from your father. Dr. Krishnamurthy, what are your strongest memories of growing up with TK Jay sir? What was he like as a father?
My remembrance about growing with my father starts with my days in Trivandrum, that is late 40s, with 45 and say 43, 44, like that. At that time, my father was a professor of music in the Swati Tirunal Academy of Music. My father was a very systematic man, and in fact, he was so systematic that when you used to write a letter, he would note down the date it is written, date it is posted, the date he received a reply for that. That was systematic he was. In everything in life, he was systematic, and he tried to inculcate that systematic values in all of us, all five of us. We are two sisters and three brothers, I being the youngest. And he used to inculcate that habit in us. While he was a music professor in Travancore, I'm told, I remember by my sisters, elder sister and all, that he used to teach theory of music, and in many classes they were attended by some senior musicians. Now, in addition to being a great musician, he was a great scholar in everything. He was a great scholar in English. He would give the dictionary meaning of any word you ask, exactly the dictionary meaning, and very well versed with English literature, Tamil literature, and Telugu literature, and Sanskrit literature. My sister was one of the foremost students of MA English literature in Travancore University. And whenever she used to get some doubts, she would go to her professor named Ramaya sir. Ramaya sir usually tell her, Chellan, நீ என்கிட்ட எதுக்கு வர? நீ நேரா உங்க அப்பா கிட்ட போய் கேளு, அவர் ரொம்ப நல்லா சொல்லுவாரு. That is the kind of knowledge my father had about English literature.
So here is your sister's English teacher saying that she should go to her father for help as he was an English scholar. When did you recognize that TKJ sir was a larger than life personality? And what did this really mean to you? For example, his Sangeeta Kalanidhi must have caused quite a stir. What was his reaction?
When my father got Sangeeta Kalanidhi award or the Sangeet Nataka Academy award, we were all pleased very much. It was not much of a surprise in the sense he richly deserved it, and it was only a matter of time that took for him to get these awards. In fact, when he got the Sangeeta Nataka Academy award, the Vice President Dr. Radhakrishnan gave the award, and he said, "Enna Jayarama Iyer ungalku idukku munnadiye kadachirukkanume ivlu late yen arudhu."
So the Sangeet Natak Academy Award was handed over to him by Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, the then Vice President of India, who later went on to become the President of India. He was a renowned teacher. In fact, we celebrate September 5th as Teachers' Day in India in his honor, and with the belief that teachers should be the best minds of the country. What was Sri TKJ as a teacher?
My father, TK Jayarama Iyer, was a great teacher of music, both instrument violin and vocal. In fact, I have also been a teacher for over 4 decades, and I have learned the process of teaching through observing his teaching. Now, whenever he wanted to teach a particular song, he would first go through various books, see the notation and other things of the songs, and also then he would learn the Kriti Sahityam, its meaning, and also he would practice it in his violin before he would teach that to the student. Now, when he taught a student, he would explain to them the meaning of the song and also the Sahityam of the song, and see to it whether a violinist or a vocalist, they follow the Sahityam properly. Now, coming to teaching, when he was teaching, he would make the teaching not very serious. He would make it look light through many anecdotes, many suitable examples which would fit into that quantum of teaching. Now, about the violin teaching, he would always insist that they play ragam melodiously and they learn the song first before they start playing in the violin. In addition to the ragabhavam, the melody, the swaram, and other things, he would give the meaning of the song so that when they sing or when they play, they do their best. Now, he would not mind talk in terms of time or other things. When they come, nobody knows how much time will lapse, and then it's kind of a mesmerized teaching and a mesmerized learning. And the students, when they left, they were highly satisfied, and they would always keep him in very high esteem. That is the kind of teaching he had.
Dr. Krishnamurthy, today we are talking about the life and legacy of your father. But we all know this wouldn't have happened without the support of TKJ sir's wife, Srimati Vijayambar, your mother. What was her role in this? How did she help shape your future?
She was the pillar behind the musical career of my father, TK Jayarama Iyer. right when he was in a permanent government job in Vedasantur in Madurai. It is my mother, Vijayambal, who, seeing his interest in music, forced him to quit the job and take music as a full career. After that, she has never allowed him to any sort of worry regarding our family matters. She was a very courageous lady. Then my mother managed the entire family in a great manner. My father was a single handing member, and 4 locations where money had to be spent. Trichinopoli, where I stayed with my mother, Delhi, where my father was staying, and Aligarh, where one brother was staying, and Benares, the other brother was staying. With a single learning member, he was managing all the 4 families. And lastly, she was a very keen learner. At the age of 50 or above, she wanted to learn Sanskrit and she started learning Sanskrit. A teacher was appointed to teach her, who used to come once a week and teach her Sanskrit. This way, in a couple of years, she became a master in Sanskrit, learning particularly Kalidasa's Raghuvamsam, Shakuntalam, Meghadutam, and Ritusamharam, and also the grammar, legendary grammar text, Amarakosham. In fact, there were a number of times when father and mother used to discuss about various slokas in Kalidasa. Thus, my mother, besides being a very affectionate mother, grandmother, she was the pillar behind my father's musical career, and till his end, she never allowed him to worry about the house.
That was Dr. J. Krishnamurthy, the son of TK Jayarama Iyer. To learn more about TKJ sir's legacy, we are fortunate to have with us today, in today's live program, his grandchildren, Shri KVS Vinay and Srimati Purnima Krishnamurthy. Welcome, Vinay and Purnima. Namaskaram.
Namaste. Pleasure to be here.
Namaskaram. Thank you for inviting us.
Layasaram is so glad and honored to have you as our guests today. The two of you are grandchildren of Sri TK Jayarama Iyer and the children of Dr. Krishnamurthy. Both of you are artists in your own right here in the United States. Can you tell me a little bit more about each of your journeys?
Namaste. It's a pleasure to be here today. And first, on behalf of the TKJ family, I would like to thank Layasaram for this opportunity for us to pay a tribute to Tata. And I would also like to wish all the fathers out there, in fact, indeed, all the parents out there, a very happy Father's Day. Now, as for my own musical journey, I had the good fortune of learning from 3 different gurus so far. My first guru was Srimati Vanaja Aramadan, who was a disciple of the famed musicologist Raganidhi B. Subbarao. After learning from her, I went on to learn with Delhi Dronacharya Sri V. Janakiraman, who was a very renowned teacher in Delhi and had a number of star students, including Sri Delhi P. Sundarajan. And with his blessings, I got to go to Madras and learn from my uncle, Sri Kovai B. Dakshinamurthy, the nephew of TKJ, the son of TKJ's brother, Sri TK Balaganesha Iyer, and himself a very respected, phenomenal violinist of his generation. As for being an artist, I think I am a student of music, and in equal measure, I'm a Rasika. Just the fact that I happen to perform gives me a chance to have the best seat in the audience when my main artist is weaving the magic.
Thank you. Purnima ji, would you like to please share a little bit about your artistic journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think artistic is a very big word, but I can definitely tell you my learning journey of music and passion for music. So just like Vinay, I was also blessed to start with Srimati Vanaja Madan and Saraswati Akka, 2 teachers who lived very close to our house. After that, I had the privilege of learning from several teachers in the Professor T.R. Subramaniam lineage. And I learned from Srimati Balakamalambad, Sri C.H. Ramakrishnan, and Dr. Radha Venkatachalam, who are all prime leading disciples of Professor T.R. Subramaniam. Once I moved to the United States, I continued to learn, and I learned learned from Sri T. N. Bala, who's the composer of Vilayade Dinirama, and who lived in Philadelphia. So I had the privilege of learning from a lot of people, music and imbibing their passion. So I feel blessed. After moving to United States, I did perform and teach for a while, after which I had to pause because of some health reasons and I could not continue vocal music anymore. But then my passion for music continued and I took on organizing very actively in the Bay Area, which is where I live. And I have been one of the active members of Lotus Bay Area, which is called SV Lotus, Silicon Valley Lotus. And I have organized over hundreds of concerts, and this is our 20th year. So I've been an organizer, a passionate organizer in the Bay Area for 20 plus years now, and feel privileged to continue my journey in music.
Wow, that is wonderful. Certainly at some point of time, you have been performing musicians, the two of you, even if you've moved on now to other roles. I have heard a lot about TKJ sir's emphasis on practice. Many of his students I've heard talked about how important he thought practice was for performing musicians, for musicians of any caliber, actually. Could you share a little more about that?
I can take that one on, and I can share a little anecdote we have heard from our father. And this was very much in the context of our practice, which, he would tell us. So he said that his father said, our tata said, "Oru naal practice pannalena first row la irukara vaalku theriyum," which means if you don't practice for a day, the people sitting in the first row or the front row would know. Oru varam practice pannalena first 10 rows ku theriyum. If you don't practice for a week, then people in the first 10 rows can actually figure that out. Oru maasam practice pannalena அந்த ஜமக்காலம் போடுறவா டென்ட் போடுறவா அவளுக்கே தெரியும். So I mean, you come to a point where literally everybody knows. So I think very much for TKJ, from what we know from Appa, practice was it was a must do. It was the foundation of everything, and he would sit every night and practice for hours and hours together. He was a night person. He would sit down and play till his heart's content. And one can only imagine, just even to see a piece of Adya Vrinda where so many people are performing together and all that comes together in one shot. What effort, what practice would that have taken, and what discipline would that have taken to make that happen? So I think it's definitely he was a man of practice and a person of perfection.
I think that is, is true. Practice makes one perfect. And I think if those that are listening today take one thing out of the legacy of TKJ sir, is probably that practice makes perfect. As you grew up to be musicians that you are today, clearly both of you felt the legacy of TKJ sir, the TKJ parampara, if you will, that I talked about earlier, as a very benevolent presence around you. My mother tells me that her father, my grandfather, K.R. Srinivasa Iyer, who was a violinist himself, would drag her to every single concert of TKJ's in the 50s and 60s in Chennai, as he hoped that she would become a performing musician. That didn't happen. My mother ended up being a writer, but she said that attending those concerts had a very profound influence on her and on her musical journey. Sangeeta Kalanidhi Mani Krishnaswamy, your father refers to her as one of TKJ sir's prominent students. She wrote that TKJ's style was known for its refinement and its classical tradition, and that yet he was ever ready to try new directions and experiments. Can you tell us what you have heard about this? I do know that, Vinay, you were a mere toddler when TKJ passed, and Purnima, you were not even born then. But can you tell us what you've heard about TKJ sir as a performing musician?
Yeah, so I'll take that one, and Purnima can chime in as needed, or as she feels appropriate, I should say. So I definitely want to touch on the benevolent presence that you mentioned. It has been that's something that we've experienced in more than one way, so 2 or 3 different ways. One is the fact that because he imbibed the appreciation of good music into his children. We grew up with good music around us. I mean, it became, a part of us. There was always music at home. There was, either listening, discussing. So, that is one very important way the benevolent presence was felt. A second way, which probably is the most touching way, is something that you just said. You said, my mother used to go to his concerts. And so even today, it's half a century since he moved on. We will hear from somebody, now or somebody from Vadivranda, an All India radio artist comes and says, oh, Jayarama Iyer perana, now Vagadishi Vashirkene, with a sense of pride. That is something that is so touching and moving. It's hard to put it in words. I mean, so that to feel that benevolent presence from a completely unexpected quarter. And on a more musical level, I think, as I can certainly speak for myself, as a music student, and especially in the last 1 year since Purnima and I have spent a lot of time trying to learn more about him in the course of our academy presentation and otherwise. We've kind of got some exposure to his musical thinking, and especially about how he think about ragas and actually all other aspects of music, and realize that one important aspect about music is I think as Sriram had said the other day, to see this big in the small and the small in the big, and that's something that he would consistently do and use in his in his music as a performing musician, and or Vadivranda. I mean, specific to performance, for example, if you took a 32-second chorus that he played, which we had a chance to present in the academy, there are actually, in 30 seconds, there are 4 pauses, and there are so many, a complete picture of the raga. Whereas on the other hand, he could play a 17-minute Chakrabarna or Natakaranji. So, and then that's something that, has given us a lot of food for thought.
I think what Vinay said is perfect, and I think just to kind of add to that, music was all around us. So though none of TKJ's children, became professional musicians, but there was a lot of emphasis on analyzing music, understanding music, developing that rasikatvam in them too. And that rasikatvam from him came down to his next gen, which, hopefully we are trying to understand as well, because our Appa, if I can share this, from the ragam he would be humming, Vinay and I would gauge his mood. So it would be something like, oh, he's singing Charu Kesi, okay, things are okay at home. Oh, he's singing Kedara Goda, oh my God, Vinay, what happened today, right? So I think music was all around us, and we somehow, that became such a big part of whatever we did, even as a family. So I think that was a big part of that benevolence being passed on to us as well.
Yeah, and Ahir Bhaira Pucho na kaise maine rain bataya means we are in trouble.
So that's really interesting. It also tells you how music just, in many, musician families, and certainly in yours, how music seeps into every part of your life, not just when you're sitting in front of, your guru and practicing, or, if you're sitting and practicing, but even in other parts of your life. So, it must have played such an important role. Vinay, since you're a performing musician right now, would you be able to share a little bit about how your journey as a performing musician has developed with the help of this presence of Sri TK Jayarama Iyer, your grandfather?
Yeah. So his musical approach that we started to learn, that's something that I am, I'm deeply influenced by. I think a lot about these days, and I should add that, especially my uncle Kovavi Krishnamurthy, being from the same lineage, he had the same kind of approach to thinking about ragas, and he would have very much emphasized Modal Sangatiliya Ragam Theriyano, each raga, like if you're drawing a picture of Mahatma Gandhi, you draw the glasses, it's enough. Raga playing should be like that. That's what my uncle told me, and I'm sure he heard something like that from his father or his uncle TK Jay. that is a very big part of the influence of TKJ's music, and and that came through that benevolence that you said, because we didn't directly see him. It has come through, steeped in various ways. And like I said, the blessings of many musicians who have blessed us, just because they've been told that we are grandchildren of TK Jayarama Iyer.
Just to kind of also add to what Vinay said earlier, which is the last couple of years, to be honest, has been a lot of reflection for the both of us. Yes, as Rasikas and Vinay as performing artists, there have been a lot we've imbibed from, listening. But I think the last couple of years, the depth to see how music was a language to him and how seamlessly it traversed across the breadth of whatever he wanted to do musically. That in some ways has been an aha moment every single time that we hear something, to say, oh wow, this also comes from the same music. Wow, this also uncompromisingly comes from the same. So I think we have, if I can say so, we have grown in this journey as well. Just being more immersed and trying to understand his music.
So since we've been talking so much about TKJ's music, I think it's time for us to hear some music. We talked a lot about his Raga Alapana, and today we've selected for you a clip from a very leisurely Alapana of Nandakumar that he performed in a recording. And what I want you to observe is, how leisurely it is, how, in 2 minutes, he's kind of scratching the surface of the raga in a way, but it's still a very complete picture of the raga in those 2 minutes for that segment of the raga. So, presenting Nandakumar by TK Jayarama Iyer.
Wow, just a short clip, and there is such a clear delineation of the Nandakumar raga right there. This brings to light what you just said, Vinay, that he could elucidate the raga sharply in such a short period of time. One of the most interesting facts that I learned about TKJ sir was that he was a film music composer. How and when did that happen?
The TKJ's film career is something that we've also started to only recently unearth and learn about. But we got a very good documentary evidence from a lecture that he gave in 1964 titled My Experiment with Orchestration. This was a speech he gave in Delhi for an organization wherein he talked about his journey, and he said that somewhere in the 30s, he was inspired to do something about orchestral music, to work with instruments alone rather than playing concerts. And so from there, one step led to the other. My suspicion is he actually started first being a musician in film ensembles, but then I think went on to become a music director. And he gave music for a few films, not too many. And he also acted as an assistant or in the orchestra for a number of other films. What is an interesting segue, probably the most famous thing that from his filmography, if you will, is a piece that is unfortunately lost to history. As you would know, Bhuvana, TK Jayarama was a journalist who is most famous for making the first ever documentary film on Mahatma Gandhi. Now, that film was made, as a documentary, and there was voiceover in multiple languages, and the Tamil commentary for that was actually given by TKJ. He also, according to his bio, gave music for some parts of the film, but that film is a loss to history, and it's a much known film in Gandhi circles. Now, coming back to TKJ.
Interesting, yeah.
Now, coming back to TKJ himself, today what we've done is we've selected one of his film songs for presentation. The song is called Mara Janaka Sri Ramanane, sung by M.R. Krishnamurthy. This is from a film called Sita Jananam, which I believe was released in 1941. And the lyrics of this film were by Papanasham Shivan, Sri Papanasham Shivan, the celebrated composer, and his brother. So now let's hear Mara Janaka Sri Ramanane.
So, TKJ sir was invited in 1950 to take charge as the composer and conductor of the National Orchestra at the All India Radio, New Delhi. There he worked in close collaboration with legendary musicians Pandit Ravi Shankar and Pandit Pannala Ghosh. How did all of that come about?
The National Orchestra, or the Vadya Vrinda as it got rebranded later, was was dreamt up as a unique cultural contribution that All India Radio thought it would bring to the table in a newly independent India. We don't exactly know who was instrumental in coming up with that concept or that move. But, again, based on that lecture that we have from TKJ, we know that even somebody as high as Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was keen that India should have a strong national orchestra, modeled on the European orchestras, but have a very unique flavor in that it would bring in all the Indian instruments and also elements of Indian music into this orchestra. That was the concept. Now, TKJ himself had already joined in 1946 All India Radio Trichy as a producer, where he was working to produce, radio dramas or musical pieces, and also starting to experiment with this Vadya Vrinda format in Carnatic ragas. So B.K. Narayana Menon, who was the Deputy Director General of All India Radio at that time, happened to come to Trichy, noticed TKJ's work, and invited him to apply to Delhi and take the position on par with Pandit Ravi Shankar, who was already there. I think he joined in 1949 as the composer-conductor for the Vadya Vrinda. So that's how it all supposedly came about.
That is very interesting. But what exactly is Vadya Vrinda? And what made it different from, say, a regular musical orchestra or film music, which is also largely performed as an orchestral ensemble?
So I can start that one, and of course, Vinay can keep chiming in as well. So if you think about orchestra is a format of Kalpita Sangeeta, which is basically creative music, right? And it is hard, as Vinay said in his music academy lecture, and I'm just going to take it right from there. It is a hard exercise in constraint optimization, which in layman terms like me means that there is something you want to optimize, but there are several limitations and constraints which are very rigid, and you're trying to optimize that within those parameters, within some very strict framework. And with that, there were several constraints or parameters within which TKJ and his composers of that era worked with. One, a team. The team of our Vadya Vrinda had a large variety or diverse set of artists, all accomplished, all very well versed in their genre, their form of music. But with that diverse set of artists came a lot of cross-cultural collaboration. And there was no one language to making that happen. There was no one, musical language or spoken language to make that happen. So that was a very large, we talk about cross-cultural communication in today's corporate sector all the time, right? And we have like hundreds of trainings to make that happen. But this was literally the same thing back then in a different scenario. So there was that to deal with. Then there were instruments which had different things to offer. For example, there were heavy gamaka based instruments, or the instruments that could produce heavy gamaka, like we know, like the veena, like the violin. And there were instruments which could not produce gamakas, like the xylophone. How do you merge all of them together in a way where they can be seamlessly integrated to produce a piece? And now all these instruments together also gave a whole spectrum or a range of octaves. How do you leverage those octaves, given what all the instruments can cover? Then there was the Shruti, which is all the pieces are either in A or A sharp, which are not the ideal Shrutis for several instruments. For example, for violin, and Vinay knows this more than anybody else, more than me for sure, which is the strings become super tight when you play the violin at that Shruti. Veena has to play in Madhyama Shruti, and I'm sure there were several things that others had to adapt and adjust their playing to make that Shruti happen. And of course, back then the equipment was much harder. Taking multiple takes was hard. Doing any kind of sound adjustments did not exist. So it had to be about getting it right. It had to be about getting it right all the time. So just to come up with that, and then all of this to top it had to happen in the exact time that was allocated for that composition. So for All India Radio, if it was 4 minutes and 33 seconds, it was 4 minutes and 33 seconds before their next program. So there was very little leeway of time. So it was about working with this, but at all times, the focal point or the optimization itself was to show the essence of the raga. It was to showcase the essence of the raga using the whole spectrum of instruments, or leveraging that spectrum of instruments. And that, in a sense, was that the whole focal point or goal that the Vadya Vrinda got established with, and the framework they came up with. Vinay, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, so I wanted to say that in addition to that, the very important contributions of the original pioneers, the first 2 or 3 conductors, especially Ravi Shankarji, Manalal Bhoji, and Tata, was that they devised a format. They set a format which was served like a stepping stone for successive composers. And at the highest level, that format was that they said that we would have 3 broad types of compositions. One, very importantly, raga based, so which means the composition is giving a picture of one or more ragas. The other was thematic, so that could be composed around a theme. Now, these are all not siloed categories, so you could have a thematic composition in one raga or more ragas, but thematic would be around a theme. Like, for example, a Gramotsava, which depicted a folk festival, is something that we had a chance to play in the Music Academy lecture demonstration. One of TKJ's very famous pieces at that time. He also composed pieces around Kalidasa's poetry, one of them being the Abhigyana Shakuntalam, which according to his notes was almost 50 minutes long, 50 minutes long. One only wishes that recording survives somewhere in the world, much like the A.K. Chettiar Mahatma Gandhi recording. And the third was folk. So Gramotsava is again folk but thematic, and so these composers set that pattern. But among those, for me, I think the most mind blowing is the raga centric, because here you have when TKJ got a Sangeeta Kalanidhi, a small segue, but he was recognized for his contributions to experiment with the orchestration. But even as he stood on the dais, one of the people who was the dignitaries there talked about his skepticism about orchestration of Indian music. And the skepticism centered around the fact that our Indian music is essentially melodic. So to take that melodic structure, that melodic concept, if you will, it's somewhat of an ethereal concept sometimes. How do you define a sahana? You cannot. To take that and create an orchestra where you're doing this all kinds of multiple instruments, polyphony, and yet to maintain a picture of the raga. That, if you think about it, it's a pretty mind-blowing concept. Which brings me to music. So you heard the Nandakumar Alapana. You heard the about 2 minutes of it where he starts and like he goes on as though he's sitting in a park or something. What we're going to play now for you is TKJ's Nandakumar Vadya Vrinda piece. We'll play approximately the same duration, and you can experience for yourself how differently he treated Nandakumar there, but you can still see Nandakumar through the duration of whatever we're going to play. We're going to play a small segment of that Vadya Vrinda piece. And just to draw a contrast, as we were talking, Purnima and I, if the Alapana is like, Elapota Chapad or some multi-course meal, and you felt the starter, here, this is going to be literally an explosion of colors when you put something in your mouth and feel 5 different flavors. It's going to be like that. So here's Nandakumar Vadya Vrinda by TK Jayarama Iyer.
So fascinating. From what you say, it seems like in those days, 70 years ago, with the kind of technology that was available then, he was truly at the cutting edge of this kind of orchestral compositions in India in those days. That is amazing. It's just mind-blowing to me to think about that way. We just heard the Vadya Vrinda. During his tenure with AR in Delhi, TK Jayarama Iyer was very well known for having been instrumental in introducing some of the greatest Carnatic musicians to the Delhi audience. He and his wife, Srimati Vijayambar, were gracious hosts to so many visiting musicians, making sure that their needs were taken care of while also organizing their concerts. I asked Dr. Krishnamurthy if he had any memories of those days.
My father was the founder president of Tyagabrahma Sabha Delhi and Music Club Delhi. In addition, he was a life member of the Karnataka Sangeet Sabha the Shanmukanand Sangeet Sabha, the Delhi Bhajan Samaj, and the Delhi Tamil Chanda. Through the first two sabhas for which he was the president, he always used to encourage youngsters. Programs of youngsters were always arranged, and at the end of the concert, father was asked to bless them, and he would bring out the best in their performance and thus encourage them and make the audience realize what they had enjoyed. Next day, when they meet personally, father would give them suitable advice as to how to improve their music and do better in life. In encouraging youngsters, father did one more thing when he was in Trichy. He arranged two programs, series of talks called Isai in Mugarji and Isai in Ilakkanam. That is appreciation of music and classicism of music, and which were basically meant for youngsters so that they could understand and appreciate Indian music. When he was in Delhi also, he continued with the same effort, and through All India Radio External Services Division, he arranged a series of 40 lectures of comparison of North Indian and South Indian ragas and make people, particularly youngsters, aware of the differences. Throughout his life, this was his attitude. In addition to this, whenever senior musicians or musicians from South used to come to Delhi, he would give them all facilities possible and also arrange their programs in All India Radio. And after the programs were over, he would take them personally to the Director General and the Deputy Director General and introduce them, which was a big thing for the musicians. Throughout his life, TK Jayarama Iyer, that's my father, always created and he made effort to encourage youngsters and make a new eco-musical system. I, as his son, have been arranging programs for youngsters for the last 3-4 decades. Not only youngsters, I wanted to even encourage the children. And as treasurer of Rajarajeswari Temple in Delhi, I used to arrange on Saraswati Puja Day their programs, they reciting a slokam, reciting a song, and present them with suitable gifts. Thus, as a true son of my father, as I have always tried to encourage youngsters and music and musicians. I have my father's full blessings for this.
All right. That was Dr. J. Krishnamurthy, son of Sangeeta Kalanidhi TK Jayarama Iyer. I interviewed him earlier, and I'm now live with Dr. Krishnamurthy's children, the grandchildren of TKJ, Dr. Vinay and Purnima Krishnamurthy. We now have a short window of time for your questions about TKJ, sir. What would you like to know about him, his life, his work, and his multifaceted talents? By the way, we are bringing this event exclusively live on YouTube, so you can ask your questions in the chat box if you're watching this right now, live. All right, first question then from an audience member. What was it like learning from him? What was the teaching experience like?
So I'll take that one. And you already heard our father speak about how it was a mesmerized teaching and learning to his students. One thing that TKJ loved immensely was giving analogies for teaching. So he would give many analogies so that it would serve as a mental mnemonic for the student when the student was actually, going and singing that piece of music themselves. For example, his his student Akila Krishnan talked about how he would talk about singing the knee of the Bhairavi. That அந்த நிஷாதம் வந்து ஒரு தாம்பாளன் வந்து ஒரு தரையில விழுந்து அதை ரோல் பண்ணி டப்புன்னு நிக்கிற மாதிரி அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு நிஷாதம் பாடணும். Or I've heard someone else talk about how how he would talk about singing the 3 O's in O Jagadamba in 3 different ways using a different analogy, which we don't have time to go into. But that was one very special way he made an impact into the student's mind.
Very nice. Sriram, are there other questions online that you
Well,
have?
I have one question that I'd like to ask, and that is, I'd seen pictures of him playing Jalatarangam. So I thought I heard, different impressions of something like a Jalatarangam, or maybe it was xylophone because of how the recording came across. But what is it? How is it that he got to learn Jalatangram? I mean, what is his interest into that instrument? Because that's probably the only carpeting instrument that I know is not, gamakams are probably impossible, just like a harmonium.
Yeah, so as far as we know, there was no Jalatarangam used in Vadyavranda compositions itself. It was a xylophone, Sriramji, to your point. That was an active member of the Vadyavranda, and he had a very, very accomplished xylophone player, Jain Kumar Jainji, who was the Jalatarangam player, sorry, the xylophone player on Vadyavranda. And it was amazing that possibly, and again, we have to say only from, listening to his pieces, as we never chatted with him, possibly his in-depth understanding of xylophone, which helped him use or leverage that xylophone as a raga, as an instrument which could even help switching of ragas, which often he has done in his Vadyavranda compositions. So that is a xylophone that he's used so beautifully and brilliantly to actually, make transitions happen in Vadyavranda.
And as for learning the Jalatarangam itself, he learned from Sri Anayempati Subbayar, who's the father of the legendary current Jalatarangam.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much. Sriramji is indicating that's all the time we have for questions, I think. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Then I have to say in conclusion that we do all have a responsibility to live up to the legacy of those who came before us by doing all that we can to help those who come after us. We're all individuals and organizations, and we do our best to preserve this legacy through websites, discussion boards. Some of you listening may be part of those. YouTube, like this event. In many ways, we today are the bridge between the past and the musicians of the future. To that effect, I want to ask all three of you, in fact, I'm including Sriramji in this as a representative of Layasaram. What is it that you are doing to ensure that our future continues to be filled with music? So I will first ask this question of Sriramji, and then Purnimaji, and then Vinay.
So I thought you said no more questions, but then I'll go with the flow. Layasaram, as I mentioned, is a 501(c)(3) public charity. Through our simple motto of perform, educate, and collaborate, we endeavor to promote initiatives and spread awareness and knowledge about our Indian culture, music, and arts across the continental US. We conduct, so the motto I said was perform, educate, collaborate, and that's what we are essentially using by conducting, organizing, providing music and dance performances of local and visiting artists. We facilitate and conduct training and outreach programs, lectures and demonstrations and workshops for Indian culture and tradition relating to classical music and dance. And we also in the near future intend to publish original material to spread awareness of our music. We invite recognized artists from India and conduct concert tours and cultural exchange programs. Some of the artists that we have brought to bear include the legendary Sri M. Balamurali Krishna, Sri T.V. Shankaranarayanan, to name a few. With the advent of COVID, and I have to, I cannot not mention about that. And then with the event of COVID, we know that the artist community at large is largely impacted. So we are having to change a little bit of how things we are doing today, and I'm sure it's going to change the way things are going to be done in the future. And we will continue to adapt to the needs of today and tomorrow. We have partnered with organizations such as the Global Carnatic Musicians Association to help generate relief and funds for artists and artist families impacted by the pandemic. So far, with the help of organizations such as ours, GCMA has been able to provide over rupees 40 lakhs, which is about $60,000, in relief funds to for affected artists and the general public. I sincerely request everyone to contribute to our fundraising initiatives by making tax-deductible contributions to paypal.me/layasaram. So with that, I'll segue this back to you, Bhuvana.
Thank you so much, Sriramji. Purnima, I would like to know what you are doing, know more about the work that you are doing to fill the future with music.
I think it is just remarkable to hear everything about Layasaram from Sriramji, and kudos and congratulations on the efforts that you all are taking as a team. As far as I think for me it has been about TKJ was a big proponent of making sure that the next generation youth are enabled, and for me that has been an important part as well. I do organize, like I had mentioned, I organize actively in the Bay Area. I have been very immersed in this community, and as you know, we are blessed to have a very large community in the Bay Area, but that was not the case 20 years ago. Bay Area was a small community back then with very little music. And fortunately, Hemige Sri Vardarajan Mama started SV Lotus at that point as his vision to encourage youth. And Shubhapriya Srivatsan, Nandakishore, and Alamelu, four of us have been anchoring it for the past 17 years together. So I think my hope is to pass as much as possible, spread this around, and provide opportunities. That is one. The second, we are also trying to pass on this legacy to our children in whatever way possible. I have two daughters who sing Carnatic vocal and play the violin as well. They learn from Vidushi Srimati Anuradha Sridhar, whom we are blessed to have in the Bay Area. Likewise, Vinay's daughter Mahima Vinay also learns music from Vidushi Tara Anand and now continues to learn from Vidushi Sri Vidya Ramnath. And Vinay's son Giri, who's still young, is also beginning to be exposed much more to music. So I think we are trying our best to pass on from generations to the next. And of course, Vinay and I are working very actively on several projects of archiving and preserving and taking it on to the next generation as well. Over to Vinay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Purnima. Thank you both to you and Vinay for sharing. And of course, to your father too, Dr. Krishnamurthy, for sharing this with, and the legacy of TK Jayarama Iyer with all of us and enabling this to happen. And finally, I will ask you, Vinay, the same question.
Yeah, so, teaching and performing, of course, is something that I have been doing for a long time. Sriram and I go back a long time where we have been, music is what brought us together, and music is something that has strengthened our friendship over time. So performance of music and teaching. But apart from that, I think, when I think about music as a legacy, there are two specific ways that I like to think of myself as being involved heavily and contributing. First is something that Purnima alluded to, which is, leveraging the archive that TKJ left us and Dr. J. Krishnamurthy has so beautifully archived, leveraging that to create a musical snapshot, or I should say a snapshot of musical history, of that time for today's audience in today's media. That's something that we are very assiduously thinking about, working towards. For example, Purnima and I are now actively working with cataloging all the scripts or the talk shows that my father alluded to, and looking to bring them in today's media so that it serves as a repository for students and researchers of music. The second way I think of is, I live in an area which is completely contrasting from Purnima. There is hardly any Carnatic music here. So I've taken on myself to engage with the larger community through music. 4 years back, I started a Tyagaraja Aradhana with 3 people. Very happy to report that our latest edition had more than a dozen performers. And, what is so gratifying about it is to see someone getting in touch back with their own musical legacy after, picking up a veena after about 20 years, coming to play one song, puts them in touch with their musical legacy. And, the joy that they get is something which is very, very exhilarating to see. Mm-hmm. So, in some, realizing your place in the continuum called legacy is something that is very special. In our case, that realization of being part of that legacy has resulted in a deep sense of gratitude for Purnima and myself. That expression of that gratitude for us, we are showing is through a small musical tribute. it's a program about a versatile musician, so it should befittingly end with music. And the tribute it's a small musical tribute to both TKJ and to indeed to the Almighty for having TKJ be a part of our family lineage. Titled Kritagyata, the piece is the Raga Malika, composed by yours truly, and produced by Purnima, and performed by our children, the fourth generation of TKJ. And we are very, very fortunate to have the wonderful, wonderful Laya accompaniment of Vidwan Sriram Iyer for this piece. Which today.
Sangeeta Jayarama